Now, one should also add that, of course, today in Eastern Europe, given the incredible levels of not only poverty for most of the population, what has been the result? Deepening poverty since the fall of the Soviet Union, all over that area. I mean, there are some wealthy people now, but in the main, there's been a gigantic regression and great economic insecurity. The same economic insecurity that we have here, but only worse, much worse. That really is a result. And in public opinion poll after public opinion poll, it is demonstrated in Eastern Europe, people look back nostalgically at the communist period, even though we know how much was wrong with it. And I want to emphasize that, how much was incorrect and wrong about that period. Nevertheless, given the shape of this area today, it looks good to ordinary people. Now, what is the lesson from all this? What can we learn from all this? Well, the lesson, in my eyes at least, is that, first of all, if we are going to have another experiment, I believe we will, because I believe that this world that we're living in is going to explode, is exploding. What do we have to, what do we need to strive for? Well, we need, certainly we need public control over the means of production. But we also need, when we say public control, that is to say the public authorities in control of the economy, more or less, to a greater or lesser degree, depending on how it works out. But we also need, clearly, a democratic system. We need socialism is not simply about, it's not about public control over the means of production. It is about democratic control over the surplus, over the economic surplus. Democratic control over the economic. The people decide democratically, the process to be worked out, how this is done. And furthermore, we have to reject the idea of mindless growth and consumerism as a goal. This from the very beginning was a capitalist goal. Unending accumulation and consumerism is it's not good and it's not sustainable. It won't work. It's breaking apart. What we need instead is to strive on a global basis for decent sufficiency. Decent sufficiency. That is to say, everybody provided with a decent standard of living. Now, you may say that I'm a dreamer, that that's not possible. But, you know, if you do a back-of-the-envelope calculation, you look at the global GDP, or GNP, something like $50, $60 trillion. You divide it with the world population, something like 6 billion people. You work out that division. This is perfectly possible in this world. We have reached that point where the level of material production is such that if you make that division and divide it up between the whole world, and I'm taking into account the need for fixed capital, a decent standard of living can be provided for everybody on this earth. What lies in the way, of course, is the political resistance of the dominant capitalist class globally. That's the problem. Now, do I have some 5 minutes? I just want to reiterate, or I want to make one more important point. In this talk, I have argued, certainly, that one implicit thing in this talk is that the United States was responsible for the Cold War. And I am not going to have time to fully elaborate that. I am not in a position here, but I have 5 minutes left, to prove that point here this morning. But I argue in my book, and I would argue here today, that in fact it was the United States who basically imposed the Cold War. The Soviet Union was timid. If you look at the founding document of the Cold War, it was the Truman Doctrine in 1947. the United States is going to intervene internationally against the threat of communism all over the world. That was a response to the Greek Civil War, the first actually hot war of the Cold War, 1947 to 1949. And the Soviet policy, while the United States intervened forcefully in the Greek Civil War, the Soviet Union held back. It held back, partly because they didn't trust the Yugoslavs, but also they were deferential still to the Americans and the British. Secondly, in terms of the division of Germany, why was Germany divided? The policy in the immediate aftermath of 1945 was inter-allied cooperation. All of the victorious powers, East and West, would cooperate to impose transformation of Germany. It was the fact that the West European and the West German economy really failed to recover after 1945 that determined the United States to basically reorganize Western Germany, split it off from East Germany, reorganize it as a capitalist economy, and make it the engine of West European recovery. And of course, they went further, and they basically not only did they help Germany to revive, and part of the Marshall Plan, they created NATO, and by 1955, West Germany had become part of NATO, which was terribly important because Germany was the leading state in Western Europe, and in terms of blockading the Soviet Union, it was a linchpin. Finally, I just want to make one more point, and that is that in terms of this argument that the United States was responsible for the Cold War, look what it did after the Soviet Union fell in 1991. Look what its policy was after 1989, 1991. The imperialism of the United States, let's use that word, it carried right on after. In fact, it became emboldened after 1991. The United States, not using military means, but economic and political ones, basically invaded the remnants of the Soviet Union. It just took over under the drunk Yeltsin. The United States basically virtually took over Russia during the 1990s. And then it carried on a succession of wars. Iraq, the first Gulf War, the dismemberment of Yugoslavia, the invasion of Afghanistan, the invasion of Iraq, the occupation of the whole of the Middle East. It's important to say that. The United States is active militarily in virtually the whole of the Middle East today, and the Maghreb. So it seems to me the United States is a imperialist entity, and indeed the more so as its economic power is slipping. This is what is going on today. The trade-off, the economic power is diminishing and threatened, and therefore the attempt to save this Kautskian hyper-imperialism at the point of the bayonet. That's what they're doing. I'll stop.
Thanks very much, Henry. I think that was a great overview.